So now we'll go ahead and go into nationalism and national unity. And the first thing we really need to look at is the big question of what exactly is nationalism. And nationalism is not this much of a modern concept as you might believe. There have been, societies where you're very proud of the nation state that you're in, that you are, a citizen. But for the most part, that nationalism is reserved for the elite. That nationalism is reserved for citizens, those that actually are part of the ruling class or part of the people that actually matter in the society. What we're going to be looking at here is a nationalism that rises up between 1848 and 1871, really during the fallout um, of the failed revolutions and leading into the beginnings of colonialism into Africa and into the rest of the world. So really, this is what creates the modern world, this nationalistic idea. And the way that I look at nationalism at this time is that it's a very basic concept of being attached to one's nation. Being there and in a country, and no matter if you are at the top of society or at the bottom, that you feel like you are a part of a society. And this is a relatively new concept to most people in Europe and the United States, basically throughout the globe, because this concept is something that is going to be different in 1848 than it would be, say, in 500 AD, or in 1066. So this is something that's new because this is going to begin to transcend a lot of cultures. If you look at this map of Europe, you see a lot of different nations coming up and being grouped together. So you, especially in things like the kingdom of or the Germanic states. And these areas, like those states, are going to be multicultural lands, lands that traditionally have a lot of different peoples with different cultures and different histories coming together. Especially, yes, in the German Confederation, with um, not only are you looking at racial and cultural differences, you're also looking at religious differences as well. So these are lands that have a lot of difference among the populace, and this is a you're going to have to bring these people together. So this is really artificially created. Whenever you look at some of the older sort of proto nationalism, like let's say the Greek city states. Those are much more naturally created nationalism, because it is this fervor, this love of your city state because you were born there and you're a citizen. The plebes, the people that were down at the bottom, pretty much probably didn't care too much. At least their voices weren't heard at all. When it came to their love of their nation state. So when you're looking at this modern idea, it is very artificially created, because it's hard to get people to really love a country just because of the way that it is. That it, that just because where you're born. For example, I like to say in classes that how many people have ever been to Buffalo, New York, or Toledo, Ohio. Yet most people haven't been there, but yet you have the same national identity, you have the same national unity that you would from someone over there, and you've never really even seen this place. So this is a very artificially created idea, and it's artificially created in Europe, among the borders of lost empires. So you're looking in the Italian city states that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the borders of the old Roman Empire in the German Confederation. We're looking at the Holy Roman Empire, et cetera, in the United States. Not really a border of a lost emperor, but really trying to capture something new. So Here in Europe, however, it's going to be about glory days, about nostalgia, about going back to a much stronger point in time, a time when, for example, the Italian city states ruled the world when it came to Rome. And here's where I was going to talk about the United States. It's really this expansion of territory as the United States moves further. Further into the West, we're going to be looking at the way that nationalism really brings this country together and moves it forward. And really, this nationalism from the modern nationalism is a product of revolutions, especially the failed ones. The failed revolutions, even though they end up um, not living up to their ideals, they do bring a lot of questions. Things like questions of citizenship. Who is a citizen? What does it mean to be a citizen? And you have to answer these questions as the desire for democracy grows throughout the continent of Europe and really grows. And this idea of citizenship and what a people is really going to be a major point in the United States. And then you are looking at questions also of patriotism and national pride because of the revolutions, because the governments were so hated that people rose up against them. The governments really began to push this idea of patriotism, of national pride, especially the more conservative elements in the German Confederation, Austria-Hungary, France, and even Spain. You're seeing this new form of national identity based on pride. This is a very new idea of actually being proud of where you're born. Most people up until, basically from the beginning of civilization up until the 1800s AD were just like, well, this is where I was born. It not really proud, not really ashamed. It is where I am from. So this idea of actually being proud is something new, as we'll talk about more later on in the class. You have, for the most part, human beings up until the 20th century basically lived or died within 10 miles of where they were born. So there was not a lot of movement. And so now you're asking people to be proud of this giant, vast stretch of land with different people, with different ideas and different cultures. It is something that is a really odd thing for people to do. But with this, national pride, with the talking about who is a citizen, you really bring a lot of stability. And stability comes with unity. The more unified people are in the love of their country or the way that they feel about their government, the more stable a society is. And I mean, let's push this over to the current day, and you can really see how disunity leads to instability as we approach, next week or in a couple of weeks, are approaching a very contested election. You can see that the less unity you have, the erosion of a national identity sort of leads to instability. And so at this time in Europe and in the fledgling United States, you're seeing people trying to create stability through unity. And so, before we can really go into the unification efforts and sort of the building of nationalism in Europe, we have to figure out how exactly the people get there. It's not just because of the Industrial Revolution, though the Industrial Revolution definitely plays a good part of it. It's also because, hey, look, France is in turmoil again. And France, as we talked about in the last section, or in the first section, the French had created the Second French Republic after the 1848 revolutions. And this Second French Republic lasts until 1852, when it is overthrown by monarchists. And you have the rise of Napoleon III, here seen sort of in this painting, showing that he is not exactly like Napoleon. He is not an emperor. He is a diplomat and a new type of leader, by the fact that you can see the robes of imperialism behind him. So he's not really going to be like Napoleon. He's going to be his own individual. And in coming into power, he puts out a good show of being a man of the people by creating an outward constitutional monarchy, but in reality, the parliament has little power. It is Napoleon has most of the power, and the people that are in parliament are usually have no control or are loyalists to Napoleon, and so Napoleon III um, begins to reinvigorate France by unifying the country through wars. Wars are a great way to unify the people, and this begins to sort of push away the whatever remnants of revolutionary liberalism remain. Now you start seeing a much more conservative government pushing through its patriotic reforms and using war to really bring the people together to make an enemy of someone else. And this culminates in the Crimean War from 1853 to 1856. And this war is a war against Russia, where France, Britain, the Ottoman Empire, and the Kingdom of Sardinia actually fight against the Russians. The Russians have been creeping into the Crimean Ocean and uh, are beginning to be an enemy of a lot of people. You have the Ottoman Empire that is basically on its last legs. You have France, who is trying to regain its strength in the region, and then you also have Austria, who is sort of looking at Russia with a side eye because they fear that Russians will overtake them. And this is pretty significant here that the United Kingdom, that Great Britain, takes a side against Russia because Russia has long been an ally, and so you have this pretty poorly planned and poorly fought war. You have a lot of old methods of fighting, lining up against one another and charging the lines. When you're starting to see industrial strength weaponry, this isn't the level that you'll see in World War One, but still you have much better guns, much more accurate guns, and you have a cavalry charges into a hail of gunfire that pretty much um, wipes out different wipes out thousands of people at one point. And so this is a pretty poorly planned out fight that's going to destroy the post-Napoleonic unity between things like Prussia and Austria, Austria and Russia. So that quintuple alliance or quadruple alliance is pretty much done for, as Austria and Russia now become enemies. And you also have Russia pretty much set back decades as far as their expansion. Everyone ganging up on Russia. Um, has has left their army pretty banged up, and the Treaty of Paris that rises up after this, it pretty much leaves them powerless. And so Russia, because of this, thinks that the Great Britain is going to take Alaska, and so because Canada's there, and so they sell Alaska to the United States, or begin to sell that sell of Alaska to the United States. And so because of this, Russia is going to um, withdraw from continental European affairs, as will the UK. The UK has seen enough of this war and will sort of begin to focus on its overshore holdings in India, in Canada, into the Caribbean, and in parts of Africa. And so the UK begins its march towards the empire that it will become after the Crimean War, and Russia begins to basically begin to reach out into affairs in Eastern Europe as opposed to Western Europe. And so, with the end of the Crimean War, with France once again in um, pretty much beginning to slide down into dire straits once more. After the Crimean War, you will see the power of Napoleon III wane until 1870. He's actually removed from office, and that, oops. and that leads to the Third Republic. So it's not going to be an easy task for France, but other nations are going to step up and step um, into the power vacuum that is created after this. And one of those power vacuums that's going to be filled is through the Italian unification. Remember, the Italian states, we talked about them at the very beginning of class, that Italy is not a country. The Italian peninsula has not been unified since the Roman Empire. You had the failed revolution in 1848 uh, that populist uprising that tried to unify the Italian peninsula, but that ultimately failed because of nobility and the elite crushing this revolution with the help of the church. Instead, Italian unification is going to come from a very unusual place. It's going to come from Sardinia. Sardinia is an island off the coast of Italy, and it is ruled by Victor Emmanuel II. Sardinia is a traditionally been fought over between France and the Swiss states and the Italian peninsula. But by this point, Sardinia had come into its own, especially with the rise of Victor Emmanuel II. And Victor Emmanuel II, like a lot of the good leaders that we've talked about in this European section of the semester, has a very good right hand man, Camillo Benso, the Count of Cavour. And Camillo Benso is going to strengthen the power of Sardinia. The With the help of the Count of Cavour, Victor Emmanuel is going to secure a lot of allies. As you can see here, you have Austria-Hungary sort of in the background, now controlling Switzerland. Sardinia controls the Piedmont area and this island. So France is here, sort of being Sardinia is sort of a buffer between the Austrian Empire and France. And so Austria definitely stands in the way of unification. And during the Crimean War, you're going to see the Sardinia ally with France in the Crimean War by giving Nice and Savoy to France. It basically gives France a foothold to the here's Savoy, and I can't find. Then here's Nice. So basically, it gives French back lands that they have traditionally seen as themselves, or seen as French, and Sardinia gains a great ally in Corsica as well. Goes to France, and the Sardinia is seen as a great ally of the French. And then this basically provokes Austria into a war in 1859, pretty quick after the Crimean War. And Austria really isn't um, into ready to fight against not only Sardinia but also France. And basically, this war between Sardinia and Austria brings in France, which is a huge blow against Austria, and Austria is defeated. And so only Venetia remains in Austrian control after after the after this war. So basically, just Venetia appears going to be in Austrian control. They're going to be a puppet state of the Austrian Empire. And this is where things get interesting with the Italian unification. Is that, as I said, in Venetia, there is the Austrian Empire still sort of controls it as a puppet state, and at this time there's a popular uprising against Austria led by a freedom fighter named Giuseppe Garibaldi. And Garibaldi is going to take capture Sicily and Naples and take over Venetia and begin his march towards Rome. So this populist uprising, this um, uh, populist fervor is still in the air, and Giuseppe Garibaldi is able um, to capitalize on it and and basically build an army of rebels and conquer Venetia, conquer Sicily, Naples, and move to Rome. And at this time, the Vatican is under French protection, and so the Pope and the French Napoleon III are telling the Sardinian king Victor Emmanuel that you need to stop Garibaldi, and Emmanuel does and goes through. The two men meet under a flag of peace, and Emmanuel basically guarantees Garibaldi that they will unify Italy, and they will defeat the Austrians, unify the Italian states, um, and create a democratic, a constitutional monarchy, basically a partially democratic state that Giuseppe believes in. And so you have Italy united in 1866 under King Emmanuel the First. And the Vatican City itself is going to remain separate as part of this Italian unification. And One of the funny things is that after the after the unification, or before the unification, as Garibaldi and Emmanuel part ways, Garibaldi actually looks at the United States of America and sends Abraham Lincoln a note that says that, I'm not a fan of slavery. I hate what the Southern states do, and I will go ahead and come in with a group of fighting men and help you. And Abraham Lincoln actually says, no, that's quite all right. But and then Garibaldi just sort of goes off and continues to fight until he dies. But Italy itself is unified in 1866 under King Emmanuel, and the Austrians are no longer really involved in Italian politics. And this was the beginning of the downfall of the Austrian Empire, really. Now, after Italy, we're going to look at German unification, the beginning of nationalism there. At the In the early mid 1800s, you have Germany recovering from revolutions that failed in 1848, and you have it in four separate states. You have the state of Prussia, Brandenburg, Prussia, which encompasses west and east. In the middle of this, you have independent nations. Then you have down in the southeast, you have Austria, and then up north you have the northern Germanic states, or what is now Denmark, and then here in the green you have the Catholic German states. And this is really where military and political nationalism really take hold. In Prussia, you have a very strong leader under King William the First, who has under him Otto von Bismarck, one of the great chancellors of Prussia. And basically, Otto von Bismarck and King William are going to ally themselves with Prussia and Austria to sort of take over the northern states, and create now just a unified state here, with Austria and Hungary being the Catholic states taking over the Northern Confederation. So here is Denmark up here, and this sort of confederation now falls under the power of Prussia and Austria-Hungary. And so after that, you're going to see Prussians begin to antagonize the Austrians. They're going to begin to do military exercises along the border. They're going to be firing cannons around, and the Austrians begin to see that this is a total provocation. The Austrians are still upset about what happened in the Italian states, and so the Austrians are going to eventually attack in 1866. At the same time that Italy is unifying, you have the 7 Weeks War, where Austria is actually defeated after 7 weeks of fighting, and Austria is kicked out of Germany. And that's going to be important later on, as Austrians really feel that they should be part of the German state. Instead, you now have the Prussians controlling the German Confederation, and the Austrians being kicked out of what is now unified Germany. And now all that's left here is southern Germany. So here is the unified German state. Here is Austria-Hungary, sort of kicked out, and southern Germany really wants, or northern Germany really needs to get the southern Germans to ally with them against a common enemy, and that common enemy turns out to be France. You actually have the very first media war in history, or at least modern history, where the Prussians are going to are going to uh, basically make up false information and leak correspondence between France and the and it's I lost the word there. It's emissaries there in southern Germany that say that we're going to fight, we're going to take over the southern German states, and this leads to the Franco-Prussian War, one of the most one-sided wars that the French ever fight. This unites northern and southern Germany together, and Germany is going to defeat France, take control of the southern German states, along with the northern German states, parts of the old Austrian Empire, and then basically he's going to declare himself William the First of. And then finally, we get to the United States. In the 19th century, the United States has become much more fractured as time goes by. You had a time when the United States was a very strong unified force, especially when you had before you really started moving into the western portion of the United States. And during this initial strong period, you have things like the Monroe Doctrine being created by the United States. And the Monroe Doctrine basically says that the U.S. will protect the Western Hemisphere, and that any sort of intervention from European forces will not be accepted, especially among South American and Caribbean nations. And this basically was a paternalistic attitude by the United States. It saw the brown peoples of South America and the Caribbean as sort of less than civilized, and in need of protection from the United States, for by the United States from Europe. And so this really it is a concept that is taught a lot in schools as sort of this big line in the sand, but really it is a symbolic yet empty gesture. The United States really did not have the ability to the ability to really go in and do anything about European intervention. And European nations will interfere repeatedly in the West, in Latin America, the Caribbean, and even in Canada. So you have this sort of really empty gesture by the United States, but it's something that is important because the United States is asserting its power in the Western Hemisphere. And so, all of this to say is that you have a United States that's trying to show force, United States that's fracturing over time, and a United States that's really ready to break even after the show of force and show of unity that it has against other nations. And really, the impetus for all of this. Fracturing, in my estimation, is the U.S. Mexican War. The U.S. Mexican War begins as border skirmishes based on an interpretation of the uh, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, or excuse me, not the Treaty of Guadalupe, the Texas Revolution, where the Texan forces said that the Rio Grande was the border between Texas and Mexico saying that the Nueces River um, was the border. And so you have a lot of skirmishes the between Mexico and Texas. And then in 1846, Texas becomes a state. And once it is a state in the United States, then any sort of battles between Mexico and Texas will be a battle between Mexico and the United States. There's actually a lot of opposition to this war because it's seen as a land grab by southern slave states. You know, the United States is expanding westward, but there is a line of demarcation between slave state and free state, and Texas and what will become New Mexico, Arizona, and California will be up for grabs for slave states. And so there's a lot of opposition based on this. There's an opposition by a junior senator from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln, who actually says that if you show me where American blood has been shed on American soil, I will vote for this war. And instead, he votes against the war, and but the U.S. and Mexico go to war, and it's a um, very quick victory by the United States as uh, they take Mexico City by 1848. Um, and there is a lot of push by people to have Mexico become another part of the United States, to break it down and create a new territory between of the United States and Mexico. But there's a lot of opposition for this, because Mexico has a lot of Mexicans, and the United States, especially the southern states, didn't want to have Mexican citizens being given full rights of of white citizens in the United States. And actually, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the treaty that ends the U.S. Mexican War, says that Mexicans in California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas are supposed to be treated equally, are supposed to be granted the full rights of whites in the United States, but that never really happens. The Mexican Americans now are routinely discriminated against. Excuse me, I lost my word there. Are discriminated against and really don't receive full rights as citizens up until before World War II. And so this grab by the United States proves very opportune for slave states, and it becomes very controversial to to free states, as this is expansion of slave states in the opposition. As you can see here are the slave states, the Missouri Compromise line, and this new territory of Utah, Texas, New Mexico, and then of course what will become Oklahoma. And this leads to a lot of um, a lot of back and forth between pro-slave and anti-slave states, and eventually this a lot of this is because of economic reasons, because the entire southern economy is based on slave holding. The fact that you have an entire group of people that you don't have to pay, that you barely have to feed, that you barely have to clothe, that don't get a day's wage, means that you can become a very wealthy, very powerful state, very powerful economy. And that is one of the reasons why the slave states has opposition. There's also moral reasons, of course, of the morality of slavery versus the growing the growing abolition movement that really takes hold in England in the 1820s, but by the 1850s in the United States, it's really taken hold in the northern states. And so, the expansion of the slave states and the oppositions eventually is what's going to lead to the Civil War. There are a lot of reasons why the Civil War happens, but at the root cause of all of these is slavery. You have you have all of these different ideas, states' rights, economic regional differences, that all basically have this common root of being linked to slavery and the actions of slave states, and the expansion of slave states is the root cause of the Civil War. So while yes, there are different reasons why the Civil War happens, underneath everything is slavery. So imagine that the reasons for the Civil War is a tree, and all the different branches are different reasons why there had to be a civil war. Underneath the root system is still going to be slavery. So that is my firm belief and my firm idea as a historian, that yes, there are different reasons, but slavery is the root cause. And you you have the anti-slavery North and the pro-slavery South, and what really as we talked about after the Haitian Revolution, the harsh slave conditions in the South really provoked the anti-slavery North to really crack down on, or really to ask for the government to crack down on slavery, to outlaw slavery. Abolition becomes the cause of the day, and then when Abraham Lincoln, who is a Republican, and the Republican Party at this time is the party of anti-slavery, this is the last straw for slave owners. The South is going to secede in 1861, and then you have the Civil War, which we're not going to get into here because there are plenty of classes on that. The end of the Civil War will end slavery, but it will not really end the plight of African Americans. The failure of radical Reconstruction, the tepidness of mainstream Reconstruction, and the rise of Jim Crow and harsh laws against blacks, and also against Native Americans and Mexican Americans in the South, really continues this legacy of slavery up until the 20th century, and really up until the 21st century. Really have never been able to move beyond that legacy of slavery. But with the end of slavery, you have the reunification of the United States, and then you have the push westward. And it is this push westward that reunifies the nation, moving west with the Industrial Revolution, powering steam and rail travel. You have this unification of the United States, really needing a common enemy or a common goal, and the expansion all the way to the Pacific, the issue with Native Americans, their land being right for the taking by Americans. This is what reunifies the nation. This is what makes America become a much more unified nation after the issues that led to the Civil War. After the Civil War, after the fallout, there needed to be a new threat, a new goal, and that is what Western unification really is. And so that's the three countries they're going to be looking at when it comes to nationalism and unity: is the United States, Germany, and Italy, as they will become much more important later on. We've already looked at France, Great Britain, and Russia, really. But we're going to kind of see the fallout here of nationalism and nationalistic reform in the middle of the 19th century. You have a lot of Western European reforms. As in Great Britain, you have a lot of reform acts opening up democracy, the direct uh, election of the House of Commons, which gives people much more of a um, unified ideal. You have Parliament basically also increasing the number of male voters. That's important. It's male voters that gives people a sense of unity and a sense of belongings. In France, you have the legislative corps given more say in state affairs, especially after the deposition of Napoleon III. And then in the Austrian Empire that is reeling after being kicked out of the German Confederacy and losing power against France and Italy, you have a large non-German group, which are descendants of the Magyars, which are also known as Hungarian. The Magyars were some of the people that came in and helped destroy the Roman Empire. Um, the 1866 defeat of the Austrian Empire leads to reform, which leads to the Ausschluss, or Compromise, of 1867, that creates the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. But you're still going to see discontent remaining among the Germanic people and the Hungarian people. So the Austrian Empire is not in a good place at this point. And then we're going to see a lot of tensions mounting in Europe as the Ottoman Empire is completely in decline. The authority of the Ottoman in the Balkans is going to wane, and the Eastern question is going to loom large. And the Eastern question is something that we'll be looking at in later weeks. Russia is going to see the rise of Tsar Alexander III, who begins to nationalize Russia by force with his creed of autocracy, orthodoxy, and nationalism. So, an autocratic government, an orthodox government, and that being uh, Russian Eastern Orthodoxy and nationalism, and this leads to what is known as Russification, or the forced conversion of people to be much more Russian. You have the um, different ethnic groups, Polish, you have Poles, Jews, Finns, and even Muslims in Russia that are now forced to give up their identities and become much more Russian, much more. They're supposed to join the Eastern Orthodox Church. They're supposed to nationalize themselves as Russian, learn the Russian language, and get rid of their old identity. So it's this forced nationalism in Russia. The Balkans itself is going to be prized by Austria and Russia, which is going to lead to the Russo-Ottoman War, and this war will end in a stalemate, and the Balkans will be split by Europe, and Europe will come in and just split the Balkans up as uniquely as only they can, and ethnic tensions remain. Even to this day in the 21st century, you have ethnic tensions in the Balkans area, and here is the Balkans as the European forces, as Britain, France, and other European forces split it up. So you have Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, Albanians, Eastern Romans, Wallachia, all these different regions. Bulgaria here, sort of, sort of very willy nilly um, split up, and without any care to the tension or the ethnic identity of the region. And so this is going to become a powder keg, and um, that's going to be a spoiler alert there for later on. So, like I said, there's no video this week. I'm off somewhere where I can't really where the background's not that great. So, um, and of course, I have pets there barking at me. So I'll go ahead and leave it there, and I will see you all later. And I'll let you know if class happens or not this week. Hopefully it does, and then I will go ahead and see you all as soon as I can. Take